Hey everybody, it's your Uncle Bear. So let's talk a little bit about unloading fees, or maybe the history of them, huh? Let's turn this off. A little bit bright. So I think how it began was years ago. Some truck driver got into a place and they said, well, Clem, one of the guys that helps unload the trailers, he called in sick today. So it's going to take quite a bit longer to get you unloaded than it normally would. So the truck driver tried to be nice, said, you know what, how about if I help out? And so he went back and helped out. Well, they got to thinking, you know what, my brother-in-law, he's not working right now. What if we tell Clem to go to hell or put him someplace else in the warehouse doing something else, and well, my brother-in-law can just come in here and say, hey, you know what, Clem's not here again, but I'll do it for $40. And I think that's kind of how it started way back when. But now if you're not familiar with how it works, basically, let's say you have a load of canned vegetables and they're going to a grocery warehouse, and when they get there, the canned vegetables, their pallet racks where they put those after they put those pallets of canned vegetables after they come off the truck, their pallet racks aren't tall enough to leave the pallets the way they came in, so they might have to take like a layer or two of cases off of each pallet and restack them on a different pallet. So basically, when you get there now, you will have to pay an unloading service to take those cases off of each pallet and restack them onto another pallet. The carrier has to pay this. Now, a lot of times the broker on the load will tell you, well, we can issue a T-check or something like that, or an EFS check to cover that, but we're gonna charge you 5 to 10% off of your rate, that you haul it for. If we do that, otherwise the carrier can just go ahead and cover the unloaded cost and invoice it back to them. And then what the broker does is they bill it back to the shipper. The shipper has to pay for the unloading of the receiver's freight. And it's not cheap these days. I mean, it can be, I've had it as low as $150, but I've seen it up to $500 to break down or unload a load of freight. Now, when I started driving, what they would do with a load of meat, they would put little meat pallets. They were only a couple inches high, but just enough to where it would keep the cases of meat off the floor of the trailer, so the bottom wouldn't get wet and drop out on you, when you pick up the cases. But they would stack these cases on these meat pallets, all the way back on the trailer. They'd go about halfway up the trailer, and you had a pretty good heavy load, by the time you were loaded. But when you got where you were going, a lot of the homeless people or unemployed people or whatever, they would be at the grocery warehouses, and they would bid on your load. You'd have like 3 people wanting to unload your truck, underbidding each other. Probably the least I ever got it unloaded for was probably 25 bucks, but the average was around 40, you know. And that was for a floor load of meat. Well, I was young back then, so a lot of the times if I had the energy, because we ran pretty hard back then too. But if I had the energy, I would go back there and do it myself and just make out a dummy receipt, you know, and turn it into the company and get reimbursed for 40 bucks and do it that way. Well, the federal government got into the picture because they weren't getting their tax money, because the lumpers, you know, that would come and do it, God forbid they make tax-free money. So instead of letting the winos or the homeless people, you know, earn some money, the government came into the warehouses and said, hey, you know what? We need our tax revenue. So somebody's going to have to come up with an unloading service. And that's what they did. So now every place you go to has an unloading service. And like I say, they're anywhere up to $500 to get your load off. And the driver's not allowed to do it at most of these places. You have to pay the lumper service. And that way they get their tax. The government gets their taxes that way, and the homeless people, well, we see them every day out on the on-ramps at the intersections, don't we? So anyway, I always thought it was crazy if I was making a product and sending it to somebody. Even today, I think it's asinine for the people that ordered the stuff to bill it back to the shipper and make them pay to unload it into your warehouse. It's like, no, you ordered it, you pay them, you know? That's kind of where I would be sitting if I was a shipper, but it's like, all right, whatever, you know? We'll go ahead and tack it on to what you owe us for the load, I guess. But it's a racket, to be sure. But I got to thinking about it once a few years ago, you know, and I thought, you know, let's say you got a big grocery warehouse. Let's say that grocery warehouse gets 50 loads a day, and each of those 50 loads pays $200, right? Okay, $200 times 50 loads, that's about $10,000. And they do that 5 days a week, right? $50,000. Now, the carrier pays that $50,000, and that gets billed back to the broker, and the broker bills it back to the shipper. And by the time everybody pays what everybody owes, etc., and so forth, you're looking at probably 90 days, you know, before it makes a full circle. Which means that those big corporations like that grocery warehouse have $50,000 that's just floating out there in the stratosphere. It's assets that they don't have to claim on their quarterlies. Makes sense? Talk soon. Be safe out there.